So, good afternoon, Kalispera again. I was just amazed to see from how much all over the world we are. So these COVID times at least allow us digitally to be together. I wanted to speak a little bit about the origin story of the art of hosting. My grandfather, who was born in a little village outside of Çeşme in present-day Turkey, used to say that whenever you start something, it's good to know where it's based or where it comes from. So just wanting to speak a little bit about how did this thing called the art of hosting and harvesting meaningful conversations come about. I'm going to take you to the 1990s, but in the mid to late 1990s, there was an emerging understanding that our world, it came through the environmental movement, but it came through other places too, governance, etc. There was an emerging understanding that the way we were making decisions was not inclusive enough, it was not collaborative enough, and it was not bringing in all perspectives. And from this, there were different communities that started to create ways of coming together that were seeking collective intelligence. These were important words at that time. And so there was the open space technology movement. You might have heard of that. There was the World Cafe movement. There were others that were looking specifically at collective intelligence. And what happened was a woman called Margaret Wheatley, who, again, some of you might have heard of. Margaret Wheatley at that time brought a new movement together called From the Four Directions. And what she was asking herself was, she got this message that she needed to bring the leaders together. And she was like, what? I'm just little old me in Utah, and I don't understand, how can I bring the leaders together? How can I bring the prime ministers and the presidents of countries together? And she realized that the word leader did not mean a hierarchical status, but it meant anybody who cares and is doing something about it. So when we talk about participative leadership, we are not talking about a role or a hierarchical position. We're talking about anybody who cares and is doing something about it. That's us. That is others that are standing up in their small and big ways to call in a world that we really want to leave for our kids and for our grandchildren. So we met through Meg Wheatley's call, we being a group of people who were, I was living in the United Kingdom. I was actually in Bath at the time. It was nice to hear Nikki is in Bath. We were in different parts in Denmark. Some of us were in Africa, in Zimbabwe, others in Germany, others in the United States and in Canada. And what happened was Meg Wheatley called some gatherings together, and we came together and we met each other. So the art of hosting came from that. We were individuals who connected, and what that connection allowed us to do is to ask the questions together. And somebody here right at the beginning, their word was questions, was we were filled with questions. We were asking ourselves, how could governance be different? How could we really reclaim democracy? Because what we have is not democracy. How could we actually school our children in ways in which children could learn and not just be fed what the previous generations want them to think? How could we take care of our homelands and our earth in ways that is not just taking from the earth, but actually living in community with her? So there were many, many questions. And what we did was we just started to meet together and we began to practice. Dimitra used the word practice. We began to be in meaningful conversations ourselves, and we became friends. We became people that cared about each other and supported each other. And it was in the days when we could move around. So we did go to each other's countries and help each other with our work and what we were doing. And so we stood at each other's backs as people were starting to take different actions in their places. And from that, at some point in 2001, somebody came to a gathering and said, "What are you guys doing? You're doing something. Can you do a training?" And we looked at each other and we said, "A training? What are you talking about? We're just meeting and we're just in our own questions and we're using different participative methods." And yet there was a real invitation to create a training. And that was when we did the first training in Slovenia. It was not in a part of the world that is kind of the center of the world, but it was a tiny country with amazing people in amazing places. And we went to Slovenia and we held the first one, and then the United Kingdom, and then it spread from there. And it's now a global community of practice, and you'll hear more of that. We're a community of practice all over the world. Those of us that started, we never had a vision of trying to create a global movement or do anything like that. We were simply learners, we were questers, and we wanted to make a change wherever we were living. However, it's a fantastic community of people. You guys will all be able to tap into that. And we came to the point where we are now. And it feels like in these times, which are dark, there's a darkness to the times that we are living, we need this practice even more. So I just wish to offer a little bit on what is this practice based on? What are the assumptions, or what were the hypotheses that we came up with when we started to create the art of hosting or participatory leadership? They're synonymous. You'll hear us using both of those. Just give me a moment because I've got to share my screen as well as do everything else. So just 1 second and I'll go there. So the assumptions that this is based on, we started off and we felt, and we still feel, even back there, that we are living times of fundamental change. Radical change, transformative change, whatever language you want to use. What that means is we are living times when we should change our behaviors and practices of living on Earth from the root system. We cannot continue living the way we are living if we want to leave this, if we want our species to be on this planet and to continue. So we are living times of fundamental change. When we are in fundamental change, where does transformation happen? And it's the place between not knowing and knowing, or chaos and order. And Vanessa will speak more on that, so I won't say too much. But when we don't really know the future ahead of us, we need to be able to step and be in the space of our not knowing. But we still need just enough structure to do that until the new order emerges. Meaningful conversations, this was our third assumption, is an innate human capacity, especially when we're seeking newness. If you speak to any people who have lost their lands and are seeking refuge, or have worked with occupation or other types of situations like that, often the conversations what kept the root system alive and helped them to move forward. So meaningful conversations is not just talking, it's actually dreaming ourselves into something new. Also, meaningful conversations actually leads to new collective intelligence, and it leads to wise action. So we sit and we discuss and we share and we understand until we see an action that will take us forward. So meaningful conversation offers us that. And then the fifth assumption is there will always be opposites and there will always be paradoxes at play. There will never be a beautiful moment where everybody agrees on everything. There will always be the positive and the negative happening at the same time. That creates tension, but we can be in that tension creatively. And so this practice is very much about playing, even working with polarity and working with those paradoxes. And we all know that that's very alive in our world right now. So these are the 5 assumptions that this practice is based on. So it's based on whether we really believe we need to find radically new ways of living, that we can do that by sitting in what we know and what we don't know, that we can really, really have conversations that move us to a new world and wise action, and that we can live when there is polarity and paradox, and actually can be a creative time to move through. I'll stop there. That's just a little bit on where this is all based and a little bit about the story. You guys are now weaving yourselves into that story. You are becoming part of how this practice will continue.